Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, the president of Dale, Carnegie Training, Tokyo, Japan, and my special guest today is an old friend of mine, Simon Wallington, who is the managing director of insurance for Corns here in Japan. Simon, great to see you again.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, well, Simon, you've had a long establishment in your career in Japan. So we'd like to go back a little bit and find out, how did you come to be in Japan? How come you're running the insurance side of Corns? And we'll talk a little bit about your experiences of leading here in Japan on the way through. So when did you first come to Japan and what brought you here?
I came here in August 1985 as to be the number 2 for Sedgewick Forbes Japan, which was the representative office for a big UK insurance broker who I joined in 1977 in London.
Right.
I was looking for overseas experience and Japan came up. And so I started here, as I said, in August 1985.
So you had no exposure to Japan prior to that?
None.
It was completely okay, Japan, right?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay. And when you came here, what was the role you had at that time?
I was developing new business.
Okay.
Mainly foreign companies who established. And I was here between 1985 and 1991.
Okay.
And so during that period, you probably recall, was the boom years, as we found out later.
Exactly. When I went back to Australia, it was 85, and I came back in 92.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
we completely missed each other at that time. But anyway.
And I was developing new business, so I would sort of find out new clients, people like James Capel, which became part of Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank.
Yeah. Right.
A lot of stockbrokers were moving in. We looked after people like Cargill, and then already there were big clients there like BMW, Volkswagen, Japan, L'Oreal, Rolex.
Wow.
In those days.
What a list of premier clients that's
right. Yeah, in those days. I mean, that's changed now, obviously. Yeah. But that's what we were looking after their insurance needs in Japan, particularly on the earthquake side.
Right. Okay. And then what happens in 91?
I left. I decided to leave.
Okay.
I was asked to stay on, and I said, no, I want to leave. And I went down to work for Sedgewick in Sydney, Australia.
Right.
And
wise move.
It was fun. I loved it.
Sydney is a pretty good place, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And worked in Australia for 3 different companies for 20 years.
Right. Always in the insurance area?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, always in the insurance area. Had 2 children. And in 2009, my old boss, who I worked for at Sedgewick, had moved over and established Corns Insurance Agency. Mm-hmm. And he just said to me, are you interested in coming back? In a role of, again, developing new business on a director level. So I said yes, and then at the age of 50, I said, sure, 3 years contract, why not? Most people would have said no. And we moved up here. My son came up to finish his schooling, and 2 years later, my predecessor decided to leave, so they asked me to take over.
Right.
And I've been here ever since.
Right, good on you. And so in that first bracket from, 85 to, 85 to 91.
Yeah.
Were you running teams at that time, or were you more or less doing your own thing, doing business development?
I was doing business development, but actually once we got the client, the servicing was done by the teams in the company in Sedgewick.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, were you running a team yourself?
No.
You weren't. So you didn't have to worry about any management, leadership responsibility for that time.
No.
Responsible for yourself as a player, get out there, get the business, right?
Yes,
good.
That's
right.
right.
And when you came back and you're in that role again of business development, you were then running a team of other people doing business development?
Nope.
Or yourself?
No.
So it's only when you took over as the boss, then suddenly it's like, well, Simon, you're now the boss.
Yes.
Start running this team here, right?
Yes.
And I guess you'd probably run teams in Australia when you'd been there.
Yeah, I'd run a team.
So I think running a team of Australians probably prepares you for running any team anywhere.
Absolutely, yes.
That'd be character building,
yes.
I can imagine. So what were some things you found when you came to Japan that second time, and now you're actually going from a colleague, basic business development, to being the boss? What was the transition like, and what did you find was challenging now in that new role?
Okay, so what I found probably most challenging was how you develop your colleagues in terms of understanding how they think and how to achieve what the company needs, but doing it, as it were, in their culture and through their way of working, rather than, say, in Australia, you just talk to someone and say, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do, and what are your questions? What are your problems? What do you think? Get them to work alongside you to achieve what the company needs to. Mm-hmm. But it's no good screaming at them, shouting at them, whatever. That doesn't work. Mm-hmm. You have to actually...
Did you try that?
No.
I'm just wondering. Do it before and after.
I'd been here long enough to realise there was no way that was going to work.
No, it's going to work, right?
So you've got to be respectful, and they appreciate that, and you've got to work with them, explain to them why and what you're trying to achieve, and get them on side, and listen to them. And listening to them is an art, because you've got the one and tatamai.
Yeah, so you've got superficial,
yes,
and then the real,
yes,
what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And are you doing this in Japanese? When you were here, 85 to 91, did you learn Japanese at that time so that you are now running the business in Japanese, or you're running it in English?
In English. 99% of our staff are fully bilingual.
Are they? Right, okay.
And my general manager and the senior managers have excellent English.
How about your Japanese after all those years?
Sorry?
How about your Japanese?
Not not great.
Not in the excellent category yet.
No, I'm sorry. Definitely not from a business point of view.
Right. Okay, so we're dealing in English, right? Okay.
Yeah. And, there's a subtle difference I've seen for people that are able to speak in Japanese. There's a greater expectation on you.
Oh, from the Japanese
From
side.
the Japanese. That's not the reason I haven't been able to learn Japanese that
Building
well.
in some margin for yourself, are you?
But there's a subtle difference.
Right.
And the team we have here are fantastic.
How big is the team?
I started off with about 18, and we're now 30.
Oh, okay. You've doubled it doubled it. Basically. It's well done.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah, and that brings different calibrations to it as well. I mean, going from colleague to boss, going from Australia to Japan, and also going from 18 to 30. So what have been some of the challenges around those sort of, okay, by the way, I was your colleague yesterday, I'm now your boss.
Yes.
How was that transition for you?
You had to prove yourself, and I found, to be very honest, you've actually got to show them there's value in having you here.
Right.
Otherwise you're an expense.
Yes.
And
hopefully a big one.
Hopefully. So it was through actually winning new business,
right,
and getting out and doing that,
right,
and going with them and bringing in new business from overseas partners.
Right.
I think they realise that there's a value on that, and also, it's important to have a good relationship with my boss, who's the president of Corns.
Is he a foreigner? Is he Japanese?
He's Japanese,
okay,
but great guy, educated overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of, you talk about increasing the size and how you do that. So when we had 18, you knew everyone, and you knew, how they were, and if they had children and their family.
Knew the name of the cat.
That's right. When you got to 30, it's a bit more difficult. But I make an effort to go out for a coffee with everyone individually in the office once every 2 months.
Okay.
And then in the mornings, I will go to everyone's desk and talk to them and see how they are. And
This is 30 people every morning.
Yep. Well, they're not at the moment because of COVID. It's not 30.
Probably, yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I would go and say hello to them and see how they're going and how they are and how's the work. And these days you've also got to be able to pick any subtle hints of any sort of mental tiredness or whatever with the COVID situation, and you don't know what's going on in their home, so you've got to watch that.
And I guess that's true in the sense of there's a couple of things going on there. One is the isolation from the team of being at home. And the second is the work hours become horrendously long where there's no demarcation point in the day. And so, yes, you're not commuting anymore, but you're probably working a lot longer hours. And also what I've found is I'm sitting for much longer. Like in the office, I'd get up and I'd go and get a coffee or go to the bathroom or go to the photocopy or something. But at home, I find, start in the morning, like 3 hours later, I haven't even moved, I was beavering away and going, hang on, this can't be good. So there's those sorts of physical aspects as well, aren't there?
Yeah, I found that as well, actually.
Yeah.
It's extremely noticeable after a while. You've just been sitting there and you're thinking, and you look at your watch and how many steps you've done and you go, I haven't done anything. I've only
0
done
steps
about 20.
in 3 hours. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah. And you don't have a chore sort of morning meeting system in the company? Do you have that? It's very typical in Japanese companies to have that.
Not a morning system. Each team leader, we've got 4 teams, they have a weekly team meeting, and then there's a monthly division meeting.
Okay, right.
And, all the news is given there.
Right.
So really, the engine is actually the team leaders.
Right.
And the general manager. And the teams tend to be 6 or 7 people. And, they work hard. And as you say, the demarcation between work and home life is difficult. So we generally have people coming in 3 days a week at the moment.
Right.
And 2 days from home. It's very flexible, particularly on those who have very young children.
Yeah.
And whatever.
And how about you in terms of the leader? Because I find I'd rather have them in the office.
Yeah.
Hey, what's happening with so-and-so? Hey, where's such and such? Tell me that project. Like they're there, you know. And now I find it's that one step removed, and you have to call them, and they don't answer. And then you get that time lag, and then they call you back. We've got to call them again. Yeah. And it just drives me crazy. I prefer the, hey, tell me what's happening approach. But, yeah, you've got to adjust to that. How have you found it?
I found it quite difficult because even when you're talking to them, looking at the body language, you learn so much.
Yes.
So trying to do it over FaceTime or whatever, yes, a little bit. But generally, I'm an extra 70% more productive when I'm in the office. In terms of getting things as leader, getting things done, getting my message across. Explaining. It's really important. I think everywhere, but for me, I find particularly here, is to explain to them why you're asking them to do that, not telling them how. Because I know generally the Japanese education system is follow the rules. So they're very good at, okay, I've got to do this. But what I'm trying to do is explain to them why, so that next time they don't need all the time to come to me. They've got to say, oh, okay, yeah, this is why I'm doing it. Okay, well, maybe this is a more efficient way of doing things. It's the why that's the really important thing to get through to them.
And often for leaders, I mean, this is not just Japan, is it? But I think busy leaders tend to skip the why and go straight to the what. And maybe if there's any hesitation, they may get into the how and never get to the why, right? Like, I want you to do this. All right, ABC, make that happen.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Yeah. And so the why behind that, I mean, Simon Sinek has made an entire career out of the why.
Mm.
I think we all knew about the why, but he's really brought a lot of focus to that, the importance of it. So when you contrast when you're in the office, being able to broadcast that why with when you're in a remote or in a split team as well, what's been more challenging about that?
I find it's actually the face-to-face is the most
more challenging.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
No, sorry. I mean, not being face-to-face is the most challenging.
Not being face-to-face. Yeah, exactly.
It's. I find that incredibly challenging trying to explain that on a phone call.
Right. Yes.
You know, it's just they may say yes, but I'd like to actually look at them and see the body language to see if it means yes, I understand, or
opposed to
yes, please go away. I've heard you. That's it.
Yeah. Well, the problem too in Japan, I think, when you're the boss, getting people to say no to you is fairly rare.
Yeah.
Anyway, because of your status and hierarchy and respect.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But also reading the air, as they say, that Kukuyoyoma about, I can tell he's not actually buying into this. Yes. And when they're a little screen, it's very hard to tell if they're buying into it or not. Like you're getting hi, and it's like, don't know. Just don't know if they've got it or not. So
I'm trying to, and I've managed to with my general manager and team leaders. I ask them if they don't agree. I say, you say no, because otherwise this is going ahead.
Right.
And they do say no. And they will come and say to me, Simon, I think this is wrong. And this is the reason why I think it's
great.
Wrong.
That shows a lot of capability on their part.
Yeah.
To say that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to go take the company down a blind alley.
So how did you encourage them to do that? Because as we've discussed, the formality of this culture is that no matter how incompetent you are, if you're the boss, people will follow you. And they'll do what you say, even if they think it's a ridiculous idea and it's never going to work. You take, hey, it's your idea, buddy. If it screws up, you're accountable, not me. I'm just following orders, right? That's a very typical framework for employees. How did you manage to get that degree of engagement with your team leaders where they feel comfortable enough to tell you, no, Simon, this is not the best idea, or I don't agree with that? How did you do that?
Two things. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, I get to know them individually and I make the effort by going out for coffee or sitting by them at their desks. And secondly, I admit to them when I've made a mistake.
Okay. Which never happens, of course.
No, it does. And I say, maybe that wasn't such a good idea of mine. And it opens them up to feel comfortable. And they can see, well, okay, this guy is, he's not shouting instructions at me. He actually admits that he does make these mistakes. So that's how I.
And that's also, we say, I admit I make mistakes. But for most leaders, their ego is tied up in their position power.
Yeah.
And often they're thrusting and competing, with their colleagues to get to the very top. And they can admit no wrong, admit no weakness. And it's very hard. In a lot of corporates I've worked in, you didn't see too many people admitting mistakes. They were blaming others if there was a mistake.
Yeah.
Or trying to wiggle out of it, if there was an error, which is actually their problem. So that says something also about your personal inner strength in yourself, to have that self-belief that you can admit that and not have that attached to your ego in a way which depresses your ego. So how have you managed to get to that illustrious stage?
Good question. I don't feel threatened here. I mean, I don't, there's no.
Would you have done that in Australia? I'm just thinking about the Australian business culture down there.
If I had been the boss, yes, but maybe to not such an extent as that because of that culture.
It's so competitive, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, to me, the most effective leaders I've seen are the ones who basically are people that serve and help their team. You show by rolling up your sleeves and saying, okay, you've got a problem with this account, so how can I help you? Not saying to them, you've got to fix it.
Right.
if you actually say, no, how can I help you? They see how you solve that and what you do.
Mm-hmm.
That creates mutual respect
Mm-hmm.
and a closer understanding, working relationship.
So this is if they've made a mistake,
Yeah.
and your handling of the mistake
Mm-hmm.
is like that, as opposed to we teach a lot of leadership training, Simon, and I remember teaching this class, a Japanese team and in-house class, and this guy said, because we have a process of how to teach people to handle mistakes. He said, when I was younger, I made a mistake and my boss threw an ashtray in my head, the Japanese boss.
Wow.
So I think how far we've come from those days, it's improved, right? There's no more ashtrays in the office for a start to throw at you. But that whole, very robust, so let's call it robust, macho culture has sort of moved a bit, hasn't it?
I used to have blackboard dusters thrown at me by the teacher. But
when you were at school, right? Okay.
School.
Wallington?
Man.
There you go.
By actually doing that,
mm-hmm.
you're actually enhancing your position as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the reason I necessarily do it, because I just don't want to lose the client.
No.
So if something's happened, they'll come and see me and say, okay, we need your help on this. And it's delving down deep into find what the actual problem is, because of
mm-hmm.
course they're not going to lay it all out straight away. So I dig into that, find out what it is. Then you work with them and you help solve it.
But the fact that they've come to you and tell you they've got a problem like that, I think is admirable, because, a lot of the Japanese teams I've worked in other companies, they're like ninja at hiding mistakes from the boss, and you only find out about it when they can't hide it anymore. And usually the time frame is so squeezed.
Yeah.
As the boss, you've got the money, the power, the authority to fix it and help them, but the time's run out and you really can't do much. So if you've actually got that degree of trust and people will tell you, that's something, I think.
Yeah, I try and encourage that. I mean, I'm not saying they tell me all the problems, only the ones that I know.
Only the ones they want you to know about.
Yeah.
Well, they can't avoid telling you about.
Exactly. But I do believe the servanthood methodology of leading has a lot of merit in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But when I have to make a hard decision, I will make that hard decision.
What would be firing someone, or what's a hard decision in your frame?
If basically the person's not performing and we've asked them and tried to help them 2 or 3 times and still nothing changes, then you've got to say, look, this is not working.
It's not working, yeah.
We've given you 3 chances.
Mm-hmm.
It's plainly obvious it's not the right position for you.
Not the fit for you.
Yeah.
So just coming back to engagement, you talked before about talking to people every day. You've got people out of the office now, but generally speaking, you're trying to have some touch with 30 people every day, which is unbelievable. And then you've got, getting to know the team, which is very, very good. What other things, have you found that work well for engagement? Because a lot of people say, normal communication, go out drinking and that sort of stuff. I mean, do you do that? Are you the sort of, okay, we're going to go to the pub and...
No.
You're not the pub guy?
I'm not the pub guy.
Despite all those years in Australia, I can hardly believe this. What do they do with you down there?
I think I had my fill over there.
You did too much of it down there. That'd be fair enough.
What other things? I don't think there's anything else. It's actually, if you go out for a coffee with them and you find out they're about to buy a new house,
right,
and they're worried about whether the work from home policy is going to change because they can't afford to buy it close to the office, so it's a long way away.
Right.
They're relying on the fact that 2 days a week they can work from home. And you find that out and, they're about to get married and things. You sit down and talk to them about those sorts of things because that actually has an effect on their work. So doing that, as well as just saying, okay, how are we going on this one? And, have you got any problems? Or I think you should have contacted the client by now, like I asked you last week. So could you tell me why you didn't? That's sort of that's how I do it. I'm sure after a few drinks, I'd probably learn a few more home truths. But with COVID especially, that hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened in 2 years anyway, right? Forget that's off the table, right?
That's right.
Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. It's off the table. So in terms of, getting creativity from people, because often bosses can be very driver, dominant personalities, pushing. You got the headquarters pressure, you got to make this thing move, push it. And often tend to be the source of a lot of ideas too, which often because they're coming from different educational work backgrounds, environments, they've seen a bigger world than maybe Japanese have only grown up and worked in Japan.
Yeah.
And they tend to be also plugged into the organisation in a sort of matrix context where they're getting a lot more information about what's going on in other countries as well, not just Japan. So they tend to be, a lot of sparks going on there for them. But when you think about the Japanese team, what have you found that works well? Because if you've got people who are engaged, then they care. They care that the mousetrap is a better mousetrap. If you're worried about making the mousetrap better and they're not engaged, they don't care. Just there's no point even worrying about creativity with a team like that. But if you've got that degree of engagement, how do you get them to become creative? What things have you found works for aiding that endeavour?
Well, we work with about over 100 overseas brokers in terms of referring business to us.
Right.
And some of those are in what we call broker networks, which is a network of independent, like-minded brokers. So they have conferences, and those conferences and the websites have a lot of educational material. And I actually usually take one person with me to each conference.
Okay.
And there's probably, if we went to all of them, there'd be 14 a year, so I don't go to all of them. And I sometimes send my colleagues.
40, you're going to 40, you'd never be here, right?
Exactly. And they learn a lot from that. So, because what they're seeing is what creative insurance ideas and just thinking is like in other markets. And so they don't come back and say, but it can't be done any differently. They come back and say, why can't we do this in Japan?
Okay, that's interesting.
Sometimes the regulations here are so tough that you can't, but sometimes it may be possible to make some improvements and some changes. So by sending them overseas, you expose them to new ideas. And we take those with us who have shown loyalty to the company, but also whose English is good enough. Yeah, because I want them not to stand in the corner. And be shy. I want them to get out and say hello to people. And I watch them when I take them the first time.
Okay.
And I sit down with them the next morning at breakfast and say, okay, I noticed you doing this. That's great. This what's going on here. Try and do it a bit more, and just come with me, and I'll show you, how we do it.
I did this 2-week course on strategy at Stanford University a number of years ago. and there were 2 Japanese guys in the class, about 100 people, 150 people in the class, those typical things. One guy, in 2 weeks, never spoke once. Never spoke once. And he came from headquarters in Japan. The other guy, who was based in America, I think he spoke twice.
Yeah.
So they wasted their money entirely. There was no engagement with people. We spoke in Japanese, so they were happy to talk to me.
Right. Yeah.
But they didn't really engage with anybody else. So that's a very important point, isn't it? That they actually have the capacity. And also, I mean, we have, I don't know if you've had this experience. We're an APAC, so our regional conventions tend to be held in APAC every 2 years. And when we go, the energy that's coming out of these other countries like Korea, China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Indonesia, India, et cetera, just unbelievable amount of aggression to make the business bigger and go for it, Well, Japan's a bit more sort of, very mature market. We're just cruising along here. But I think exposure to that energy is a good thing. Like the Japanese, when they go there, like, whoa, wow, they feel the difference.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really good. And some of them have come back and just sort of saying, wow, these people, they're so outgoing.
Yeah.
And
fired up.
And aggressive. And,
Yep.
So, but, the insurance industry here is pretty heavily regulated in a number of areas. So
you can't get too fired up.
You can't get too excited in terms of firing them up too much because they just hit a brick wall.
Right. So in that sense, is creativity something that's beyond the industry? I mean, is the industry so heavily regulated that there's no point trying to encourage creativity in your team?
I think the creativity would be more efficient ways of working.
Okay.
It would also be if a client has a particular risk,
right,
that it can somehow be insured by this type of insurance,
right,
with a few tweaks, so long as they're allowed. And then it's convincing the insurer that it's a good risk and that they can do it. So, there is creativity there.
And how do you encourage that? How do you foster creativity?
Well, when I know about it and I know there's this risk, I'm usually the one leading it. And then saying to my colleague who's working with me, okay, why can't it fit in this product, this policy? You tell me where it cannot be done. So I have to convince them first, and then we talk to the insurance company, and then we've got to convince them.
So what about them talking to you, saying, hey, Simon, look, this has come up. I think we could get this square peg to fit into this round hole here if we do this and this and this, opposed to what I was saying before. We as the boss are the source of the drive and the energy and the ideas. How do we get the drive and the energy and the ideas from them coming to us saying, let's do this?
I've probably got about 2 or 3 people in the office that do that.
Do you? Okay. Yeah. And why is that? Why have you now get that fostering for them?
I think it's because they have had a lot of exposure to overseas.
Right.
They can see that this is a great opportunity, and they are saying, "Come on, Simon, can I have your thoughts and let's try and make this happen." I've probably got 2 or 3 people in the office, senior people, that do that, and it's mainly because of exposure to overseas.
Okay, that's good. That's very good. And a big part of that too, creativity is based around trust. And you've talked about trust already to some extent, but let's go a bit further on trust because, before I came to Japan, I thought the Japanese are very unemotional in business, or poker face, and very formal, and then you get to know Japan and you realise it's a very emotionally based decision-making framework here. And particularly I notice that when I'm recruiting people and you get their resume, and you, like, often by the time they get to us, they've changed jobs quite a lot, because they're no longer in the Japanese system. And you ask, well, you've changed here. Why did you choose? Oh, well, my senior asked me to come and join this company. So what? But, that emotional connection with the senior, and then often that company goes bust or gets taken over by another company and they get fired. So they're back on the market again, And you're seeing these emotional decisions they're making, which in a Western context seems a bit like, oh, was that really the logical choice there? Yeah. So I've always been struck by there's a lot more emotional decision-making going on here than I ever imagined. And that comes down to trust, it comes down to trust. And so same with buying, I think. There's a belief that I trust you, therefore I'll keep buying from you. And I think everyone does it. If you find someone who's a good salesperson, who's giving a good level of service, you'll go back to them because they're a known quantity. And I think Japan sort of takes that to the X factor, a known quantity, the X factor. But that trust is so critical. So with your team as the leader, what have you found works well, apart from greeting everyone every morning, coffees every 2 weeks, apart from doing all the stuff you've already told me about, that 2 months, sorry, that works well for you, generating trust?
I think it's actually leading by example.
Okay.
You do what you say you're going to do.
All right.
When you say you're going to do it.
Okay.
They're watching me. They're watching me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm saying, okay, I will call this person at this time. We'll review it, and then next Monday we'll make a final decision.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep to that,
mm-hmm.
then you build up the trust.
Mm-hmm.
If you're one of those bosses that say, yeah, leave it with me,
yep.
and nothing happens, or you go off
forget about it,
or you go off and do your own thing without keeping that person copied in,
right?
You don't have the trust.
No.
And they won't come to you anymore.
Mm.
They'll be very
particularly with clients too, is because there's a lot of possessive feeling of obligation, responsibility, accountability, empathy for their client. So, if anyone's looks like they're flippant or a bit laissez-faire with their client, they don't like that at all, as my experience. They're very protective of the clients.
I've also tried to teach them that, so, in Japan, when a client asks you a question, you have to have an answer. So the client might say, well, is this covered? And to be very honest, as you well know, there's probably about 100 exclusions under any policy. You've got the cover.
I never read the policies because it's too complex.
No, that's why the client asks us. And I'm saying to my colleagues, look, if you don't know the answer, rather than give an incorrect one, just say to them, I'll get back to you tomorrow on that.
Mm.
You haven't lost face.
Mm.
It's actually, they'll respect you for that rather than giving them the wrong answer, which exposes our professionalism, and as well as they will lose trust in you because you haven't given them the right answer.
Mm.
So that's what we're also, we've also encouraged a lot in this division.
Mm.
Don't be shy to say, hey, let me get back to you. I need to reconfirm this with the insurer, or I need to check through this wording and get back to you.
And I think that's a big relief too, because that takes a lot of the pressure and stress off. And, most companies I deal with are very detail-oriented and the people are very detail-oriented. They want to know the ins and outs of every damn thing, and sometimes you can't know all of those things.
You can't.
So I think giving your people the freedom to not know and telling them it's okay not to know, that must be a big stress relief, because then they know I'm allowed to say to the client, I don't know, but I can find out for you, right? So I can imagine that would breed a lot of trust as well.
Yeah, because I think the Japanese system is that you've got to try and give them an answer, whatever happens. And the worst thing is someone trying to mumble their way through an answer that doesn't really answer and is not accurate either. That doesn't look very professional to the client in that regard. So that's another way to build up the trust.
And, you've been running the shop here since, 94, is it?
No, I've been here since, that's a good question, 2010. So I took over 2012.
So 2012, okay. So it's coming up to 10 years, right? 10 years next year. So over that 10 years, have you attempted to create a Corns culture Japan, like a Japan version of the Corns culture, or implant the Corns, whatever the Corns culture is, or what's the culture situation?
I mean, this is here in Japan is where Corns has got most of its employees.
Mm-hmm.
So the culture I've tried to build in this division is we are a family.
Mm-hmm.
We, as long as you do your job and you do well and you meet your KPIs, we do encourage individualism to some extent, and you have the freedom to be yourself. But you have to look after your clients. You have to meet your KPIs. And, we are a family, so we look after each other. And we have, in the past, taken on a couple of employees who are no longer here who try to dominate.
Right.
And I've just said we do not employ egotists and the sort of alpha males to any extent. I mean, if they're good and they're prepared to be as part of the family, that's great. But we help each other out. So if someone's having trouble, then we get the rest of the team to help them.
This is always the issue, though, right? When we scope that out, it sounds like it's pretty simple, right? Tone those alpha males down or hit the road, Jack. Except often, the people who are big producers, it can be those people, or they can be very technically very adept, but not in people skills, not in teamwork capability, right? So you've got people who are a good player for themselves, but not necessarily a good team player. And you've always got this struggle, particularly if they're performing at a certain level of production, but they're not really in the team. You've always got that tension. What do I do? If I axe this person, we're going to have a hit on the bottom line here, but we'll have the teamwork will improve. Or, how do I massage this and manage them? What's your thoughts on that?
If the person's bringing in a lot of business but not working as a team, I don't want them.
Right. Doesn't matter how much they produce.
Doesn't want them. Because the effect on the rest of the team would mean we could probably lose half of the team because of this person's character, and the costs of re-employing and all the loss of productivity just because we've got this one person. So we just say no. We might move more slowly forward in terms of bottom line, but we move together as a team. And maybe it's very Japanese thinking, but in the long term,
it's better.
We're better.
Yeah, I made that mistake. I had a technician, and I should have gotten rid of him, but I persuaded myself like an idiot that somehow I could manage it.
Yeah. And
in the end, he left anyway. But I should have made that earlier. But it is one of those tricky decisions.
It is tricky, and we've had a few people come to us and say, "Can I join?" And obviously they're well connected and all this thing, and we're going, "Thank you very much, but no, thank you."
Right, you can tell they're not going to fit.
Yeah, you don't fit. I'm sorry. Corns culture is this culture.
I personally, I hate politics in companies, and I've worked in companies where there's tons of it, and it's really like a cancer.
So the first time I was in Japan, we had a lot of politics.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So I swore to myself that when I came back, if I took over, there was no politics.
Get rid of politics.
If there's any politics, we stamp on it
straight away,
and it's very clear to that person. No, right. we work as a team and as a family.
Right. So if you were thinking about someone who is going to be sent to Japan to run the organisation here, they don't know Japan, they don't speak Japanese. A bit like you when you were sent here, right?
Really?
You're going to Japan, Simon. Oh, good. What would be some advice circa 2021, 2022 that you'd give that person about being successful in Japan when they take over here?
They should they should find 2 or 3 people that have been long term in Japan as leaders with experience, like people like yourself, and they should ask their advice.
Mm-hmm.
And they should treat everyone with respect
Mm.
and give them a chance.
Mm.
And to be honest, not do anything for the first 2 or 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Just get to know people, understand
Mm-hmm.
them, and then they will formulate within their mind
Mm-hmm.
what they think is, because they'll get feedback. Because when you join initially, after your colleagues get to know you, they'll start to give you some thoughts of their own on what should change and what, and then they should work on that. But they should always stick to the ultimate purpose of what that division stands for.
Mm-hmm.
But getting mentors is, especially in Japan, is extremely important.
How do you get a mentor in Japan then? You just arrived, you don't know anybody. How do you, because you can choose the wrong mentor as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I wouldn't choose just one. You would
be okay, of course.
Yeah, exactly. You would ask around and find out, and then you'd work out how many jobs they'd had and what industry and what they'd done, and they've been successful. So you can get a leader that's been extremely successful, so say 3 years, push the staff really hard, but that's not, in my opinion, a leader.
No.
It's just a production factory.
Well, that's like running the machines without any maintenance, and then you have massive production and the whole thing blows up.
That's exactly right. So you should look for someone that's, worked a fair bit of time in Japan and that's grown companies and organically, and who's just got a balance in their thinking as between the West and the East and Japan. Not someone that's totally one way or the other, because both cultures have a lot of value. It's just meshing them together to go forward and working. And Japan's changing, the odd, when I was here in 1985, it was Japan way is the best way. Look how big we are now in our economy. There's a bit more humility around these days.
There is, yeah. Pride cometh before a fall, as we say in English, right? As an idiom, yeah.
They definitely, you cannot take over here a company without understanding the culture, but not necessarily trying to do it the Japanese way. You've got to do it your way, but taking into account all the values that really would work in helping your company go forward.
Just a bit of a digression. Do you think you've learnt things yourself from the way Japan operates as a professional yourself? Because often we think we're coming from the West, we're working in Western organisations, so therefore we know better what's going on, and we're bringing the Japanese with us on the road forward.
No, mine's the opposite.
Yeah,
I've learned more here
right.
than I ever learned in Australia from leadership.
Right.
Much more.
Yeah. And what were those particular things you learned?
I would say humility, respect, working together as a team rather than a group of individuals, trying to outdo each other.
Oh, that's those hairy-chested Australians, and that's just the women, right?
And also, exactly. And also doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. I've learned so much here. I'm forever grateful for that. But it may seem like more work because you've got to talk to them, you've got to talk to this person, but it actually creates a much better company and a much more stable and stronger company.
So what would be some other advice you give someone who's new? You've given some really good advice already. Any other points would come to mind?
Have a sense of humour.
Okay.
Absolutely. You've got to see the funny side of things here.
Yep.
Especially if you've not worked in Japan before.
Yeah.
You've got to make a decision that you're in it for the long term.
Right.
If you come here saying, well, this is a stepping stone for me and I'm out again, then you're not going to get the best out of your employees.
But no, most people, though, they're sent here for 3, and often they are, rotated out.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're lucky, they might get 4. So how do you apply a long-term sense to a very relatively short-term posting?
I think you've got to read the culture when you come in, and then you've got to change what needs to be changed, not only for the sake of the company, but also for the stability of that company, so that when you move out and your successor moves in, he doesn't come into a hornet's nest of politics and people leaving and everything. Sometimes you see people come here and there's a mass exodus, and then there's a whole lot of new hiring, and then there's a mass exodus, and you can go, well, okay, someone's not understanding how to run a company in Japan. But even for 3 or 4 years, just reading it and making that company a more stable and productive, so that you leave it in a better position, than it was when you took over. I mean, that's a great gift you can give to your Japanese colleagues when you leave. Like, the company's much better, and your head office would appreciate it as well, because they're not going to have all those on costs of hiring, firing, and whatever else they do.
I often draw the metaphor of when you land in Japan, you're taken immediately to this lake. It's a warm lake. It's not cold, but it's covered in fog. And so you're swimming around in the fog in this lake trying to work out what the hell's going on. And you can sort of vaguely see forms in the distance. You can hear noises, but you've got no idea what's going on after the first year. The second year, the fog lifts a little bit. You go, oh, that's an island over there. Okay, some trees over there. Right. And by year 3, the fog starts to lift and you start to see things, and then you get on the plane and you go to your next posting.
This is a mistake that foreign companies make all the time. We used to say it took 18 months to be able to understand and understand the clients and everything. And you can imagine the poor Japanese in this company, right? Yeah. They've just got the boss to understand how things work, and they're all going for this new direction. Then he leaves, or she leaves, and you've got a new one. It's almost like you've got to press in the old-fashioned tape recorder again and say, okay, just listen to this.
This is where we've been for the last year. This is where we've
been, so these people, when companies send overseas sort of foreigners here, they, I think, should be here at least 5 years to be productive.
Right.
At least 5 years. And depending on the personality and obviously their own situation.
So, if you think about your definition of leadership, what would that be?
I would say you lead by serving, servant leadership.
Okay. It's become a bit of a buzzword.
I didn't know that, but no, I mean...
There's a lot of books on it now,
to be honest, I'm a Christian, and that's in the Bible anyway.
Right,
Jesus.
Okay.
But it's very effective because they say, the Japanese are looking at you saying, well, he's not just sitting in that office with the door closed all day,
right,
earning goodness knows what with all these added benefits and just shouting orders at us,
right,
looking for the monthly results.
Yep.
He's actually rolling up his sleeves and he's getting stuck into this, why this invoice hasn't been paid,
right,
or why this hasn't, or why this cover needs to be placed, or how we can do it. And I think that's what it's all about. It's not... That's one part of it. You've obviously got to have the strategic, plan of where you want to go. But if you talk about the day-to-day leadership, it's how can you help your colleagues do the best possible job? Because after that, all the results follow.
Yeah.
As well as the relationships.
Well, that sounds like a good note to wrap it up, Simon. So thank you very much for joining me today. So
thank you.
Join us again for the next episode of Japan's top business interviews.